In this video, we're going to look at simplifying surds, mainly doing multiplying and taking powers. So when we multiply two surds together, of course, we can do the opposite of what we do when we simplify surds by breaking them down. So when you have two surds multiplied together, you can mix those. It's the same as the square root of 7 times 2, which would then become root 14. And what you would want to do, why you would want to do that, is because none of these two separate surd parts can simplify, so having them written together just makes more sense. And even though 14 is a bigger number than 2 and 7, there's less to write, it's just simpler. When you have two surds that multiply together that are the same, of course, if we follow the same situation, 5 times 5 inside to give us root 25, what you'll find sometimes is that if you multiply surds together, you end up with a square root that has a nice answer, such as 5. Hopefully you might have already known this because anything times itself gives it squared, so root 5 times root 5 is the same as root 5 all squared, which I could have wrote like this, and then the squared and the square root would technically cancel each other out to give us 5. But in any case, if you followed the steps that are highlighted there, then it would work fine. What can also happen is that you can multiply two surds together that give you a surd, but it can then be simplified. So root 3 times root 6, we'll combine them together to make root 18, but then root 18 can be written as root 9 times root 2, which will eventually become 3 root 2 as our answer for that. Also, when you're multiplying surds, there might be some other numbers that are kicking about. So in the case of the next one, we have this 2 at the front of the root 5. Now that 2 doesn't technically mix like the surds do. Our root 5 times root 2 we multiply together to make root 10, and that 2 at the front just tells us how many of those root 10s we have. And in that particular example, nothing can be done, so we're finished with 2 root 10. Moving on, you can then have combinations of surds and whole numbers that are all being multiplied together. You could technically rearrange this so that you're multiplying the whole number parts together and then you're multiplying the surd parts together, but you'll probably instinctively know that you've got a 3 times a 4, that's going to become a 12, and then by this stage, a surd times a surd, you can mix them together, so you'll end up with 12 root 10. Always watch out, just pay close attention to what surd you end up with, and then ask yourself, can it be divided by 4, can it be divided by 9, so on and so forth, to see if you can simplify the surd. Then you can have situations where you have powers of surds. So actually I should have put another example here where if you just had a surd straight up squared, you end up multiplying it by itself, and the squared and the square root cancel out, and you'll just be left with 2 in that case. Of course, with this one here, the squared is going to apply to both the 3 and the 7 when you have two terms multiplied together, a times b to a power. Then you can share that power separately. Take them first before you do the multiple. It also works if you have a division in here as well. That's for another video. So when you have this situation here, a 3 root 7 all squared, then we're going to take it as 3 squared times root 7 squared, which I can write as this, or I could write it as squared inside. It's entirely up to yourself. The 3 squared gives us 9, and then the root 7 all squared is going to give us 7, and then what you're left with will be 63. Okay, so those are a few examples of simplifying surds with multiplying and powers. Done.